I will, yeah, there we go. I just started the recording. So I see already a few people asking questions. Are you going to have any documents that you will share with us about the topic? Yeah, so actually we'll go over some, and that's the first thing I'm going to do. So the first step is just if you have any questions, you can go and ask them in the chat. I'm not sure if I will see it here while I'm talking or showing my screen. And there's also an option where you can go in a Q&A. You can open that as well. You can ask your questions there as well. That's probably the better option when you want to ask a question. Just go to the Q&A. And I believe it will blink here for me if somebody asks a question. But at the end, I will open up the floor and you can ask questions. I'll see if I can make it work so you can also, whoever wants to ask questions by talking, I will see. I think I should be able to make that work as well. All right, so yes, the first thing I'm going to show here is what's all behind this, behind the option to run Spire in the cloud. And I'm going to start sharing my screen here. There we go. And also I'm going to ask, can everyone see my screen? If somebody could just in the chat just confirm. Let me close this. Yes, screen is visible. Okay, people are seeing my screen. All right. Okay, so what's all behind this? So first of all, just a few, I guess a clarification, or because I got a few questions about Spire in the cloud. So when I talk about Spire in the cloud, it is the actual desktop app that is being ran in the cloud, and it involves a remote desktop gateways or gateway. So it involves remote desktop technology like Microsoft, even though we use more additional tools behind the scene that adds a lot more to it. But everything runs on the AWS cloud. So for those of you who are already familiar with AWS, they provide a full stack of technologies to run applications in the cloud or run desktop applications in this case, but also web applications, mobile apps, you name it. For those of you who are not familiar with AWS, it's a good place to go and learn a little bit in general. So we use several of their tools. Here are just a couple of them. This is my account. So we use Cognito, DynamoDB, which is a database. They're just endless tools that they have. Like here's a long list of them. And if you have never played with anything AWS, you can go and open up an account under if you already have an Amazon account, you can use that same account to log into AWS. And they do have some free tiers. They call it a free tier on some of their services that you get when you first sign up for the first year. So if you ever want to play with anything Amazon that they provide in terms of their technologies under the AWS logo, go and open up an account. And when you're going to go into some of their services, you'll see free tiers, and then you just sign up and for whatever service that is, and then you can go and run that yourself. And so what's behind this that I'm going to be demonstrating today? So this is part of it, Remote Desktop Gateway on AWS. So that is part of it. That's what's running. So you see a little diagram here. And I will explain what's available, how we do this in a bit more detail. Even though we do run some proprietary software to deliver our services, and a few of the things that we've developed ourselves, so that's proprietary. I will not be demonstrating that. That is something we've developed over time to deliver our services to add an additional layer of services and also security. So again, that's proprietary to us and partly developed by us. So I will not be demonstrating that, but here you get the general information, and you can easily search for this. Just search for AWS Remote Desktop Gateway and you'll get to this page, and it explains what it is. And I will explain two options from a pricing perspective when I'm going to get further into the details here in what that involves. And so from a technology perspective, that's this, and also their other service. Let me just move this here. Their other service, which is called Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. That's something that we make use of as well. Very powerful in terms of how you can set it up. You can set it up so that you can connect with your own local environment. And as you can see, VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. So you can connect your local environment. It requires hardware on the local environment that supports a VPN, a specific VPN. That's where we also have developed some proprietary tools that we use. And so then you can connect your AWS resources using a virtual private cloud to AWS. And so it's completely secure. It's a private VPN tunnel. Again, at the end on the pricing side, I will explain a little bit more about how we make use of that in some scenarios and not in other scenarios. So it involves in the demonstration in terms of what it does. It's really simple. So what it does, and this is where some of our tools are in use. First, I'll just demonstrate the interface. So what it is, when you want to use Spire, it's essentially you have a web page, and this all gets set up by us to log into. And so you get to this login screen. And here you have two options. You have the option that's HTML5. It's in the browser. So now we would use Spire in a browser, and I'm going to do that here first. So I'm going to go and log on. And so it opens up a second screen. And then here it just takes a little bit to connect. And what we now have in the browser window, I have my menu. And so in this case, I'm only running Spire in this case. Keep in mind, you can also run all kinds of other applications, like just about any desktop application will work for this. And so here in this case, I'm only running Spire. And so what I've done here, I've opened this up in a browser. So now I'm running Spire inside of a browser. And I'm going to open up Spire so you can see how that works. And so now it's just your typical normal screen for Spire. And when you open it up, so everything is in the browser now. So now I'm going to log in to the database. And so now everything is in my browser. So obviously you can see that my screen is too small to have Spire fully extended in here, even though I can maximize it. So you can see that. Again, I'm doing this completely in the browser. So it's a more limited than when you run it as what is called as a remote app. And I'll show that next. But this is typically good. And we have several customers when they travel and they just want to access Spire real quick in a browser. So they travel and they want to access it. This doesn't allow them to print. They can save, but there's limitations in terms of how you can print from the browser itself. So there's some limitations when doing it this way, but you do have some options like to add files, to print. It's a printer driver that is added. But again, there's some limitations with this. And so I'll close this now. And then what I'm going to do here now, I'm going to log off. We'll close my session. And so now I'm going to do the next step. This is how most of our all of users actually use it this way. So they use the remote app option. And when I'm going to go and log in now, this establishes a session so that Spire is actually running in the cloud on AWS resources, but it is as if you were running it locally. So I'm going to open up Spire now. I'm going to log in. You'll see here in the bottom. So there we go, log in. So logged in. So you see in the bottom here now in my taskbar, as I open up Windows, they actually open up as if I was working on my local computer. See, I open up an inventory record and now I have it open here. So from a user perspective, you're actually working as if you were on your local system, and it adds it to the taskbar. So yeah, from a user perspective, the user doesn't know really. I mean, they know that they are running it in the cloud, but from a user perspective, they see it exactly the same way as if you are running your client installed locally. And again, so this is now running in the cloud. And again, any window I open, it opens it in the taskbar. And then what happens too here is with the printing. So it's all integrated there too. We're using some proprietary tools for the printing itself. So when you go and you open this up at record, you want to print something. Here I'm not set up with the printing. When you select a report, It's the exact same thing then as if you were on your local printer, so you don't have to do anything in terms of selecting a printer. Or you can also do it like you would normally in Spire, where you would say, okay, I want to always send this one file to a specific printer and save it as default. So it's the exact same thing as if you had your printer installed locally, and when you hit print, it will print on your local printer. So that's all also integrated using some of our tools. And so again, from a user perspective, they run it as if it was installed locally. So that is the way Spire is ran. In a few of the reasons, we've had 2-3 customers, 2 of them that moved over to running it this way instead of on their local server. One is 2 of them specifically had an attack on their network with that ransomware, and so they moved this way. One of the things that if you're going to read about the AWS tools, you will find that it's very well protected. AWS themselves have a firewall that myself using or anybody using their technology, we have no control over, but that firewall is very secure. And if you read anything about security on AWS, not that long time ago, they had an attempt of a DOS attack. And for those of you who don't know what a DOS attack is, that is when somebody tries to flood your web server and flood it to the point with requests that the whole network goes down. And so AWS was able to mitigate that. They were never able to do it. And so the firewall is excellent for AWS. That's just their core technology stack, but then you can also enable additional firewall options, which we do on their on AWS, and we can set additional rules and so forth. And so then we take additional steps to protect the resources from additional protection for ransomware, or even just brute force attacks, which a brute force is similar to a DOS attack. And so then here on my browser, you will first of all see here it says not secure because I don't have a valid certificate here installed. For those of you who are familiar with certificates, SSL certificates, this is protected by an SSL certificate. So all the information that is being exchanged, like actually my screen that I see here and that is running in the cloud, it's all through the port 443. And for those of you who are a little bit familiar with web applications or websites, the port 443 is the one that all traffic transpires, like for banking websites, and that's what requires a SSL certificate. So again, here it shows the connection is not secure, and that's just because I don't have a certificate configured for this particular server, just for demonstration purposes. So it's very secure. You're exchanging the information the exact same way that you're exchanging your information when you are dealing with your bank and so forth. And so then again, from security, we add additional security layers to this whole thing where we have more control over, particularly to this login screen. So the one thing that you will most often find is hackers or anyone interested in stealing information, they will always target the most common ports. So in the most common ports are port 80 and port 443. So port 80, we don't even open it up. It's possible if we don't. So then there's never any attacks on that port. And that you do all on the back end of the Amazon tools. You have all those options. In the port 443, of course, we open that to all traffic, but then we have additional tools in place where we protect against brute force, because what hackers very often do, they will just look for a port 443. They will start targeting that port to see what's running behind that port. And so then anyone with a little bit of smarts in terms of hacking, they will know right away as well. They look for application that they can log into and see if they can also brute force into that application by using a password, and then see what's all behind there and that type of stuff. So they will first always look for username and password entry screens. Same thing for websites. And then they will target that. And what we have in place, we have a brute force, we have a layer in place that's a brute force. And so basically what it does is we can set it really tight. If they use the wrong password or username, we can set it to twice, then it blocks them right away. So then they are completely blocked out, so they can't go any further. And again, that's just, some customers don't like to have it too tight in case users use a wrong password once or twice, then they get locked out. So we just set it according to what the liking is for the customer, but typically no more than 5. So if anyone in a hacker, what they typically would do is they would take an attempt to guess a password username, and the most common would be admin. And so then if they have a script running that will attempt to brute force or to get into a login screen, then they just try it 5 times and then they're blocked out. They can't do anything anymore. So again, that's what's running behind the scenes. And so it makes it very secure, and also particularly from a ransomware perspective. And that's where we've seen more than about 2 or 3 customers that have moved to us just because they did not want to run that risk anymore of having their network compromised. So that is a little bit about security and how it runs, how it works. And what I'm going to do next, I'll just show the pricing, how we price this, and also talk a little bit about what I demonstrated here before, the V, let me just go in, the virtual private cloud, how that works and how we price the services by using or not using this. So what we do is, the Spire cloud pricing is without Active Directory integration is $35 a month per user. And what I mean by without Active Directory integration, that's exactly what I talked about before. With Active Directory integration, it's $45 a month. And with Active Directory integration, that's exactly where we use the Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. Now, a virtual private cloud gets created anyways. Anytime you deploy a resource on AWS, it automatically creates a virtual private cloud for you. But what we do, then we take it one step further, and we actually take and connect that to a local Active Directory. And so there's more than one benefit, but one is we have several customers who are on Office 365. So when we connect to the local directory, and the local directory is also integrated with Office 365, so then at the login screen here, it's one username and password everywhere. So when they come to work in the morning, they log into their computer, they log into the cloud, or they log into Office 365, it's one username and password everywhere. And so that's how we integrate this. And that's, of course, optional. Some companies, smaller companies, they simply just go with the cloud option. They may not very well not even have an Active Directory. And if they do, it's not that important for them to integrate. So then we just create a directory on the AWS resources. And so on AWS offers the option where you can create an Active Directory and then connect that to resources. And so then all the users just get managed on the AWS side. Again, with the Active Directory, then that's now managed by a local Active Directory. And then also there's additional options when you use the Active Directory integration. One is where some companies have like they share documents, and then they have a shared drive and document redirects. For those of you who are familiar with Active Directory, you'll know what that is. And so then that also gets shared all across all devices in the cloud. So that, for example, if in the cloud here, I were to go and do an export here, I can actually browse to my documents here in the cloud. This is actually the cloud window that comes up. And that's also all set up to share the documents, like a document redirect. And so then when I save a file here in the cloud, and I can go on my local computer, look it up, so it's all tightly integrated. We also have a few, or 2, I believe, that use the OneDrive. So they have Office 365, and so then they use OneDrive, and then we have that set up as well, so that their OneDrive is available in the cloud and also locally. So then all documents are synced all across all devices, their mobile device and whatnot as well. So there's that benefit, and again, very secure because we use the virtual private cloud option. It does require, using that option, it does require hardware on the local side that will support connecting to AWS resources. And we use this firewall, Untangle. Here, actually, I'm logged into this firewall. This firewall has the options. You can actually take and deploy the firewall itself in the AWS side. That's to take it another step further. And then you can connect the two together, and then it all becomes interconnected. And so an example is we have one customer, they have, I think, about 6 different locations. And so that all needs to be interconnected for them from one location to another one. So we have it all set up and connected with using this firewall. So it's a very good firewall for doing this. But again, there's also other firewalls that support that option as well. So back to the pricing. So with Active Directory integration, it's $45 a month per user. And then so commissions on this for partners, it's 10%. And so then here's just one example for 10 users without Active Directory integration per month, $350. And so your commission would be $35 per month and $420 per year. There's a license fee set up initially for setting this up, $125 per user. Depending on the setup, in some cases we just waive the setup if it's a larger setup and they're obviously committed for too long term. So that just depends. But we'll work with the partner if you have referrals or whatever. We'll work with you and determine the setup and so forth. That is what I have to demonstrate today. So go ahead and ask questions. I think I can make it so that I can have, if you raise your hand, I believe I will see that and then you can ask a question in real time. Let me just first look at the chats. Okay, nobody has asked any questions. So the best place is the question and answers. You'll have that option there. You'll see, you can ask your questions there. Yeah, I see one question. Will it work on a Mac and an Android? Yes. So on a Mac, it only works running it in the browser. It does not work as a remote app. But on Android, on an Android device, you can actually. So again, opening up Spire on a small Android phone, that would probably be not be ideal. You wouldn't use it. But if you had like a tablet or whatever for the warehouse or something, where you would be able to tap. But yes, so it will run on them as well. But again, Mac, it's more limited. Mac, it's more limited. You cannot run it. You just run it inside the browser. And so then we have some customers who use Macs. They obviously just run in the browser, but they don't need to print anything. So then that's how they use it. Yeah. Okay, next question. Where is Spire server installed? So that is also installed on a separate instance from the cloud. So that's actually and I should add, I'll add this too while I answer this question, is it is installed on a server that is deployed, that is connected to the directory, either local or on the cloud. And so it is just a Windows server where this all runs on. And so I'll add as well that if you as a partner refer, and so we have several of them, you have full control. So we'll give you remote desktop access to this service if you want. We'll also give access to you through the browser if you want, if you just want to quickly connect from anywhere. If we give you access to remote desktop to the Spire server so that you can manage it yourself, then we just whitelist your IP address. We don't open up RDP for the public or for the world, so there's no hacking attempt or anything. So then we whitelist your IP address. But again, you can also access it through the browser just like this, so we can set that up for you as well. So as a partner, you have full control of the server. That's where Spire is hosted, or where Spire is installed, and so then you can get in any time to work on reports and so forth. Yeah. The next one, where is Postgres database? So yeah, it's on the Windows instance. That's where the Postgres database is on. It's just like a local server, but then on top of that, that's where you run that whole stack on the cloud. So that's how you access it. And then the resource size. So again, for those of you who are familiar with AWS, you may know a little bit how it works, and I'll just show here. When you go to instances, so they have, well, let's go. So the EC2, those are their, that's where you deploy instances. And so you select the size. And so what happens sometimes is customers, they just have a couple users. So the size of the resource itself can be pretty small, doesn't need a lot. But then if it's a larger setup, then you add more resources. And the pricing on AWS is all on an hourly basis. So you have to, it's actually quite a bit to learn. So you obviously, if you would want to do anything like this yourself, you can, and it's not, there's no secret behind this in terms of how we do it. Again, we run some proprietary tools that I would not share, but other than that, anybody could actually go and learn how to do this. But you have to, when you work with AWS, you have to know how their pricing model works. And so that ultimately when you have resources running, you know what your monthly bill is going to be, because everything runs, pretty much all the services from AWS. There's some services that don't, but pretty much everything is by the hour. So you have something deployed and you have it running for, let's say, only 5 hours a day. Well, you'll only pay for the 5 hours, but in this instance, like for Spire or something like that, you have it running 24 hours a day, so you pay for all 24 hours. So yeah, takes a little bit of time to learn how the pricing works and what it will ultimately end up costing you when you have AWS resources running. Next question, yeah, Postgres, I answered that question. How long does it take to set up an example tenant? It's actually very quick. So if you come to us and you want us to do it for your customer, we can literally do it in, well, if there's a rush because let's say a customer is in a dire situation because of a ransomware attack, we can do it on the same day. It takes a couple hours to set that all up. And so, yeah, it's quick. And again, we have, in our case, like if you're learning, you would want to do this yourself, well, you would have to learn how it all works. And so we've done this for at least 6-7 years now. And so one of our techs and myself, we know everything in and out and how it works. So it's very quick for us because of that. Yeah. Okay, this question. Does all yearly Spire fees get covered by your yearly charge, or is that on top? So that's on top of it. So Spire is still owned by the customer. They still own the license. So that is still on top of whatever we charge. Our services is just for running it in the cloud. That's it. Yeah. And then of course, if these are customers where we support Spire, then we typically have them on a support program where everything is all inclusive. But if it's partners referring, then you still take care of all the Spire end of things in terms of renewing and all of that. And we only do the cloud. Another question, can we access shared directories and share printers? Yes, yep. So that's how it works. So accessing printers, that's by default. There's a printer driver that gets installed on the local computer. But if you use the directory option, so if you want to integrate with shared directories and SANs, isn't it NAS, network attached storage? I'm not sure, you're saying SAN, not 100% sure what you're referring to, but anyways, yes, with the Active Directory integration, that is all included. So you can connect with whatever resources you're running locally. And then, yeah, typically there's a bit more setup involved. So then we look at the specific environment, whether first of all, the hardware in place, the firewall hardware in place will support connecting to the AWS resources. If not, it obviously requires a firewall upgrade. Yeah, but if going with that option with the Active Directory integration, then you can share everything across all resources. Yeah. See, somebody submitted a question. We had shot. How are snapshots managed? So that's so backups. Yes, that's something that we do. So here too, we use some proprietary tools. We use the services from AWS. So AWS has resources where it's also called snapshots, where you just take snapshots of your cloud instances that you're running. And so on there, it's also called snapshots. And so what we do, we just run the snapshots on the Spire server, the remote, the system, or the server where Spire runs on. And then we create snapshots in the background, and that depends on needs, whatever the customers. But typically it's once a day, just like a backup. You take a backup of site. That's the same idea as if you were taking a backup of site. And so AWS has all those services, the snapshot services, but they don't have anything that you can use to run them actually. And so that's where we use some proprietary tools as well. On top of that, AWS has a service called Lambda. That's where you actually can run functions inside of the cloud that do endless things. Like you can integrate with your local resource and you have something specific, you can run functions in the cloud that executes things locally on a server, and like it's endless what you can do. And so we use that in some, we use that not for everything. Again, there's some proprietary tools that we use for ourselves that we've developed. But other than that, we use the Amazon snapshots, and that is the equivalent to taking a backup from your local. So if you are doing a backup locally, you take it off site. That's the equivalent on the AWS platform. And so then if there's ever anything, let's say a database corruption, just, oops, needed to drink a little sip of water here. So then if there's ever any database corruptions, anything like that, so that's all covered in that. And we can very quickly get companies back up and running if there is any issue ever. The tools, again, provided by Amazon, they are very quick to get things up and running if there's any issue. Second as well, we of course also make use of the support that Amazon provides. That's again something that you can do if you're learning, even though that's cost that you pay for that. So essentially whatever you spend with AWS a month by deploying resources, if you add their support, you add 10%. So if you're spending, say, $1,000 with Amazon, you would spend 1,100 and you get support, and you literally, their support is really good. Like, so odd time we ever run into issues, or because we by now probably use a good 20 of their tools that they develop, that they have. So then there's obviously often a need to get their support involved with whatever else we do. And so, yeah, they're very good at supporting their customers. You can literally start a support case if you pay for that support, and you have someone on the phone within 5 minutes. Yeah. How are snapshot? Yeah, so I answered that question. Our backup files or data available for download to load? Yes. So one thing that we do as well, that's optional. So what we do, we install a utility on the resource, and then we can also make those snapshots synchronized to whatever you want. So if you have a Dropbox, a Google Drive, or FTP or whatever, and you want a snapshot of that on a daily basis locally for you, then yes, we can set that up as well so that you have the snapshot wherever you want it. So in some cases we have where the customers want the snapshot locally as well, just as an additional backup. And so we set that up so you have full control over that. Yeah. What would the client cost for hardware on their side? So if they don't have a firewall in place that supports the connection with the directory, if they don't have that in place, that's where we use and recommend. It's what we are most familiar with. We use Untangle. And so that's a firewall options. They actually have a free option. It's an open source firewall, but for the connection, we need to use their commercial product. And I believe for 50 users, it's something like $700 a year, something like that. It's very inexpensive, and it's a solid firewall. Like, it has many great functionalities. Big fan of it. We've been using it for, I don't know, at least 15 years. It was a very new product when I originally started on my own. I started using it, but it has really grown. It has become a very solid firewall. It does a lot of things. And so that it requires the hardware, of course, as well for the for this to run this, the Untangle. And that's probably around, so the initial setup, it's probably around $1,000. And that too, you can select which hardware, and the hardware is usually selected based on how many users you have. So you want faster hardware if you have, for example, 100 users on your network, all browsing in, sometimes connecting to a VPN or whatever for local access. So yeah, that depends on that. But the hardware itself, including the initial license for the Untangle, is under $1,000 for, say, a small business. But again, that depends on how big, and if the business is larger, then of course the hardware needs to be more powerful as well. The next question, will the remote desktop support custom crystal reports that are currently being used by for each? Yes, it's exactly the same as if you're running it on a local server. So there is no difference in that. So yeah. The next question, would it work with my add-ons like SwiftCount, Shopify, custom access apps? Yes. So I don't know if Albert is on the call here. I think I saw he was. He did join. So we have some customers where we have Spire, we host it in the cloud for them. And I know that SwiftCount, we set them up so that they can connect to it. So that works fine. Shopify as well. So yeah, again, if you have And MS Access apps, yes, you could do that as well. So the only thing that would be required if you did run something like an MSS, Microsoft Access, if you needed to run the full client on the cloud resource, so the customer could access it, you would require to add the license. But typically, I think what most people do in that case, they just run the runtime. So yes, you can run that. Yep, you can run all of that. You can also connect to the data from create an ODBC connection to the cloud, so you can run it locally if you want. But if you have Access apps where the customer is using the runtime client, yep, works as well. Works very nice. Yeah. With I don't know how you pronounce it, a firewall. I've heard of that firewall. The best one, so the best success we've had. Oh yeah, so Albert said yes here. Yes, so Albert is on here as well. So Swift count is, I think there's 2 or 3 setups where Swift count is being used where we are hosting Spire for them. I've heard of this firewall, Sophos. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I've heard of that firewall. I would have to check, but what you want is the, what's that called? IPsec, I think that's the VPN. You can use that. Most firewalls have that option. It's the most common firewall on, standard firewall on given setups. Untangle has a firewall that's a VPN that's called OpenVPN right there. That's included with it. That works really well. It's fast, it works well. But then the other firewall, where is it here? Yeah, the IPsec firewall. So that's the most common firewall, sorry, not firewall, VPN that firewalls have built in. If they have that option, then you can connect to AWS resources using that, and then again, establishing a virtual private cloud. We've tried that on one. We did go back, or the customer did end up adding Untangle as their hardware and firewall. So then we just ended up using OpenVPN. It didn't work the best. And plus there's actually, if you do use the IPsec, there is an additional charge from AWS that you pay. I believe it's about $40 a month or something like that, just for running that type of VPN. But with Untangle, we run the OpenVPN client, and then there's no additional charges to use that, and it's readily available. It's not like AWS has their resources that you can use, and there's also all kinds of third-party tools that you can add, and so we do that. We add several other in general at the resources that we host for customers in the cloud, like websites and e-commerce sites and so forth. We use several of their other tools as well to make that all work. Yeah. So yeah, I would have to see what that firewall supports. There's Sophos, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. We have to see what that firewall supports. But my guess is it would work fine. Yeah. Anyone else in the chat window? Let me close this. No. That's all I got for questions here. Any other questions, anyone? If you have a customer where you would want to consider this for us to host Spire in the cloud, you can just reach out to me directly, and we can discuss that. Another question: how much memory is available to the Spire user to help with performance? Is it flexible? Yes. So again, you need to learn a little bit how the AWS resources work, and you basically pay for what you sign. So for what you add. So if you create an instance with AWS to set up, let's say Spire in the cloud, whatever, you have to know how their pricing structure works and what they charge. Again, pretty much everything works on an hourly basis on Amazon. So if you deploy something, you have to know how much it will end up costing you, because if you don't, and if you're not familiar with the calculations and so forth, all of a sudden you'll have a bill at the end of the month and you will be surprised because you are running something that you were not expecting you to cost anything, or cost very little, and the next thing you know, you'll have a very big bill. And also with AWS, I'll just add this as a personal note. Your AWS account, you have to also make sure you've protected really well. So some of you may very well be familiar with dual authentication. That's where you use like a text message to authenticate yourself when you log into a service. I originally, this was several years ago, learned that lesson the really hard way. Somebody somehow found obviously used my AWS password. This was, I think, before I was using a password program where you still use like one password for 100 different websites. So somehow my AWS account was hacked, and I was surprised that they didn't do a whole lot. They didn't do a much, except for they deployed endless resources to all of a sudden find out that I had literally, I think, about 200 servers running. And the next thing I know, within literally 3 to 4 hours, I had a $26,000 bill with with Amazon, because somebody had hacked my account. And I guess all they were attempting to do, they were just horsing around and making it really expensive for me to run or to the resources that deployed. So yeah, I had a $26,000 bill within a couple hours on AWS. And then of course I caught it, and it took a long time to sort that out, but Amazon was very gracious and they wiped out the bill, because $26,000, that's not something that everyone has laying around every day. So yeah, so that happened to me. So just keep in mind, anytime you do anything online like this, you want to protect yourself very well. And more than anything, use a password program that saves your password. I use LastPass. So that's just a little personal note on an experience I had once. And so again, Amazon was very gracious. They wiped out the bill. So I did not, at the end, I did not have to pay for it, but that was a very, very quick or a hard lesson to learn. So yeah. I just put my contact information here. So yeah, there's my email address, phone number. You can give me a call. And I'll be happy to discuss this for you. I'll put my contact in the chat window as well. That way you can copy and paste that. So that's right there, my email address and phone number. Any other questions? So yeah, I did answer the memory question. So again, that depends on what you deploy and how big. And so again, that takes some learning how that all works on AWS. And there's a lot of good YouTube videos out there. Just search on pricing, for example, go to YouTube or even websites. How does pricing work on AWS? And you'll very quickly find out. They will explain it, explain how that all works. Is AWS subscription separate from your package? If separate, how much? No, so ours is all included. So we have, so then our, we or myself, I get a monthly bill from AWS for everything that we are running on AWS. And we are probably right now spending, I don't know, about $60,000 a year on AWS services. So we have a lot of resources deployed. We have several customers with Spire in the cloud, and so that's just something that we've learned over the years. So I've learned myself initially how the AWS pricing works, and also works where you can go in, also you can read about this, read about reserve instances. If you search on Google, you can go in commit, like on Amazon, you can go in commit to say 3 years on a resource. So you say, okay, I'm committing to 3 years on a resource. You can then go and say you'll commit to it upfront. So you'll pay everything upfront for that resource for the next 3 years or year. You go between a year and 3 years. Or you can just say you'll commit to it for 3 years, but you will pay on a monthly basis, or partial upfront and partial monthly. And then when you do that, you get your service cheap. Like it's literally, I think it's often about 30 to 40% savings when you commit to long-term, to a long-term resource. And so once you commit to a long-term resource, if you then end up not using it and you don't need to have it running for whatever reason, you'll end up paying. That doesn't matter. So once you commit to it, there is no way out. Like they will not let you out. So you're basically the one that says, okay, I'm committing to using this much of AWS resources for the next 3 years. And then again, you'll save 30 to 40%, but then you're committed. So, so because we do so much of it now, for myself, it's easy to commit to things. I know how to commit to it. They have reports that you can run, to see how much you're using and potentially how much you would be saving if you commit to the resources. So again, it's all learned, and there's a lot to learn. So anybody, so I've also, of course, I've shown how to run Spire in the cloud, how we do it, but I've also just in general giving you a little bit of information on AWS. And so if you want to learn AWS, there's just way too much. You could do endless hours of webinars to teach somebody. So that's not what I'm here to do. But if you are interested in learning it, just go and start searching on YouTube and start with the basics, and you'll find a lot of very helpful resources from users explaining how it all works. Is there a minimum commitment? So yeah, when customers come to us and we move them to their Spire to the cloud and run it on AWS for them, of course we want them to commit. So because I do commit as well at Amazon for specific resources every month. So if they just want to try it out, we can set it up just as on a trial basis if they want to try it out. And then if they want to add the license, then well, it's basically a trial. So we'll allow it to run a trial. We'll show them, we'll let them try it. But then once they want to commit, then we at least want them to commit for a year. But typically, well, we've never had any customer leaving because they were in the cloud and they all of a sudden decided to even go local or just go host elsewhere or whatever. So we've never had that. But yeah, typically, I mean, none of our services are on a contract basis where you are committed. Like if you really have a reason that you need to move away, well, there's nothing that where we will make somebody commit. And I should also add just one more thing. I know that some of you are concerned about keeping the data in Canada. So up until I think about 2, maybe close to 3 years ago, AWS didn't have a data center in Canada. Now they do. So all your data is in Canada. So there's no questions about you know, having your data in the US, and where CRA has they have some rules that data has to be available in Canada, can't be outside there, you know, all of that. So some of your accountants who are accountants, you probably know about all of that, how that works. And so yes, they have a data center in Canada. Amazon, AWS, does not publish the addresses of their data centers, and that's of course for security reasons. So nobody knows where these data centers are, even though you know the general location. So here in Canada, based on what I've read, they have one in Quebec City and there's one in Toronto. And so that's all we know. We know the city where they're located. And other than that, they are highly secure. Like if you go, you can actually go, if you're interested in learning about the security about these data centers, you can go and search on YouTube for videos where you have users demonstrate, or like the companies demonstrating their data centers and what's all behind it. There's videos out there where they give you a tour of the data centers and all the security behind it. It's very secure. Like physically, I mean, it would have to be extraordinary if somebody ever made it to a data center physically and was able to steal information. So very secure. We are fully confident of it. So also one thing on Azure, some of you may know Azure, that's on Microsoft. That's exactly the same service actually. They also have many different services. That's good too. We've played with it a little bit, but I started with AWS, I don't know, at least 10 years ago now. And so over the years, I've learned it very well. I have a couple of team members that know it very well. And so there's never been any need to go and go and try Azure. So we have not tried it, but it's the same. So if you want to go and learn one, well, again, you would find variations in tools. AWS obviously has the most because they've been in this the longest, but Microsoft is good too. They have all kinds of very good tools as well. But again, we haven't spent much time learning. Jim says it was very interesting. Yeah, you're welcome. Hope you found this helpful. Again, I've gone over a little bit more other stuff than just our services. So glad it was helpful. And so what I will do, I will send a link out with the recording. So if you did sign up, you'll get another email. Well, perhaps I'll just send out a secondary email with the link as well. Just so that everybody has it in case somebody missed the actual webinar and wants to see it after, or you have other team members who want to see it. But that's all I have for today. So I'm going to stop the recording and end the call. Thank you for joining and have a good afternoon.